Cool.
Hi.
Hi.
Lily. How are you?
Very good. How are you, my love?
Very good. Very excited for your answer today. So, tell me about yourself.
Okay, so my name's Melissa Lamb and I'm a teacher and I'm also a teacher trainer. And I train people how to teach. So I train something called the CELTA course, and I also train the level up, which is the Delta course. It's a degree level, a master's level qualification as well.
Oh.
And I've been teaching since 1998. I've taught in China, I've taught in Peru, I've taught in Colombia, quite a few places around the world. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. You have a very busy life. So, well, our research project is about reading strategies to develop reading comprehension in teacher formers, students that are preparing themselves to become a teacher.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
So in this case, we are trying to look for information about reading. So our first question could be for you, taking into account that you're a former a trainer teacher.
Yep.
What does it mean reading for you?
Well, like, put it at its most simplistic form, reading is just a way of decoding information. So you started by decoding letters, so recognition of letters and the forms of letters, and then recognition of those letters coming together and making a word, so knowing the beginning and the end of a word, and then matching what you've decoded to your knowledge. So it might be a knowledge of a bit of vocabulary, or it might be a knowledge of structure. And then once you've matched it, you then match it further to your knowledge of the world. Okay, and that's what's happening when you're reading. You're essentially decoding information in order to receive a message.
Okay. And what do you think that is the role that reading have to a teacher? It's just like, if, for example, my classmates, they are studying to be a teacher. So what could be the best definition or the role that reading have for them?
I think as a teacher, you use reading in different ways. So it kind of depends a little bit on your purpose, or the purpose for the text. But if you were just trying to improve reading skills with your students, then what you're trying to do is get people to become more aware of the skills and strategies they use in their first language and transfer them across to use them in their second language or third language. So skills such as skimming, scanning for information, are strategies we purposefully use in our own language in order to interrogate or decode a text. And what's often not done by teachers is make those skills explicit to learners and teach them how to develop those skills.
Okay. So maybe you don't know, but in my country we are not used to read so much in Spanish.
Yeah.
Either in English is worse. So it's not a common activity for us. Yes. So what do you think that is the best way to teach reading comprehension? It's just like it's something that you can teach, or is something there are some strategies that you can teach so they can develop that skill?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing is, first of all, I'd say, like, you can't really teach comprehension. Okay? Either people understand something or they don't understand something. So that your starting point with teaching a strategy or a skill is your choice of text. So you need to choose texts which are maybe what we call I+1. So just above, but not much, just above the comprehension level of the student, so that the text has sufficient challenge in it for the strategies to be needed. Okay? If it was below, then a student would just read it and understand everything. So the first thing is choosing the right text. The second thing is choosing the right kind of strategy to use with the text. Yeah, okay, so for example, you would automatically, if you had a newspaper, the first thing you do with a newspaper is you look at the headlines and then start guessing what the article's about. And that process is called prediction, and prediction is a strategy that we can teach students to do so that when they actually read the text, they're more aware of what they think is going to come up, and then when it comes up, they're like, oh yes. So as they're reading, they're going, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, which increases the pace and the flow of their reading as a result. So that's just one example of choosing the right kind of strategy, but it has to fit the text. And if we were, you know, looking at, say, something like some cinema screenings or something, okay, we wouldn't use prediction as a strategy. Okay, we're much more likely to be scanning to get the times of the films. Okay, so then what we would do is like teach students actually how to scan for information, facts, figures, names, that kind of stuff.
So those strategies that you just mentioned, those are normally strategies that a native English speaker use. Are the same for foreign students?
Yeah. You mean people who are studying English, or you mean
yes?
for
example, for me, I'm not a native English speaker. I'm learning now. Yes. So the strategies that you use are the same that I can use.
Absolutely. I'll give you a really good example. Right. When I went to Peru, I decided I needed to try and learn some Spanish. Yeah. And I love reading, and I thought, well, I know, I'm going to see if these strategies work. And I'm basically a beginner in Spanish. I'm going to see if I can use the strategies and read a book in Spanish. So the first thing I chose was a book that I knew the story of. So I chose Harry Potter.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. And I said to myself, right, okay, it's a novel. What strategy am I going to try to use? I'm going to try to skim it. But I'm a beginner, right? Now the good thing about Spanish and English is there's a lot of cognates. So it was possible for me to skim. What I needed to have in order to do that well was a tolerance of ambiguity. And a lot of students are not very tolerant of not knowing something. Okay? So I said to myself, okay, I'm going to read the first chapter. If I see a word, and it's usually in Spanish a verb, because they're the different words, more than 10 times, I can look it up. If I don't see it more than 10 times, I've got to just guess and move on, guess and move on. And what happened was, it was quite interesting that, you know, because I'd set myself this like little rule, and I was trying to skim, I also said my finger always has to move on the page. So if my finger's stopping, it means I'm starting to focus in on some detail, okay? And then I stop skimming. So what started to happen was like I actually had to sometimes skip a whole paragraph. So I had to have that tolerance to just go, never mind, skip it. And I was doing a lot of guesswork, right? Yeah. Guesswork using what I knew about the story, and what I knew about Harry Potter, and what I knew about the Dursleys, and all of this kind of stuff, right? Yes. And so the first chapter was quite difficult, but it got easier and easier and easier as I went along, because of course the story has a theme, and the same sorts of things happening again and again, so the same sorts of vocabulary are being used again and again and again. And I was able to complete the book in about 4 days.
Good.
Okay, so I was able to read a book as a beginner in another language, not because I'm intelligent, but because I understood how to use the strategies. And I was able to say to myself, oh, well, if you don't understand that bit, move on. So it's perfectly transferable, but it's not easy to transfer unless the student understands or is aware of the strategies.
Okay, so you said that you love reading.
Yes.
and that you know the strategies, how to use the strategies.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about extensive reading and intensive reading?
Well, what do I think about them?
Yes. As a reader.
As a
you used to read. Yes. And your opinion about that, as you read often, so your opinion could be as the extensive reading context. Yes.
Yeah.
But as a teacher, you could say intensive reading have a more powerful meaning, or more powerful importance for a student.
Well, again, it depends on your purpose, doesn't it? So, like, for example, I think as a language learner and as a teacher, I think it's really important that students start reading extensively. There's one really, really important reason behind that, and that's nothing to do with reading skills, it's to do with vocabulary. So there's this thing called lexical priming. Vocabulary priming, okay? And so as you read, okay, you're hit with, like I said, all these verbs, right? And you're hit with this verb 10 times, and either consciously or subconsciously you notice it, okay? But you might not do anything about it. You might not try and learn it, but you're primed, which means that if you're in a classroom situation or you're talking to someone in that language and they use that word and you want to know what it means, you're primed to learn it. You're in the best possible position to understand and learn it because you've been hit with it so many times in a context, okay? And that's why everyone always says, if you want to improve your vocabulary, you need to read, because you're constantly being primed with words. And they become part of your receptive vocabulary. And then all it takes is the stimulus to make it part of your production. Yeah. So that's probably the biggest reason that I would try and get students to read extensively. Alright? Intensive reading, on the other hand, it has a completely different purpose. Because what you're trying to do when you're reading intensively is apply skills and strategies, okay, in order to understand the detailed message of a text. So it's more about the skill than about the vocabulary. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
So it's a different set of purposes. So I do a lot of both with my students. I do lots more intensive reading, just because it's achievable in class time, right?
Yes.
Extensive reading is the kind of stuff I would do like as a project. So, do you want an example?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so I had
this. You have one.
Yeah, right. So I had this really lovely group of students about a year and a half ago. I was teaching in London from all over, and they all chose a book. They were all about sort of pre-intermediate level. Okay, so they all chose their book. It was graded. Okay, and then what we did was we sat down with our books and they just looked at the picture on the front and they tried to predict what it would be about and who are the characters and stuff like that. Then they went away and they read a bit and then they made some notes on whether their predictions were correct. And then they told their partner about it, and then their partner wrote some questions for them for the next bit. And then they went away and they read a bit. And carried on kind of doing that, and we ended up like them making role plays with the characters and that kind of stuff. And the point behind that was to try to structure how the students go about reading extensively without... So the other thing is, if you didn't do something like that with them, you'd say, yeah, read a book. Student goes home, tries to read a book, gets really frustrated, looks up 500 words, and then doesn't want to read ever again in that language. So if you're doing extensive reading, it's like more like a long-term project. So that was like over a month, where they were interacting with the storyline, the characters, and exchanging their opinions and that kind of thing over all these with all the little graded readers that they were they were reading. And the nicest thing about it was they started reading each other's books.
But that's good. You apply. That takes me to my next question. Do you think that you can mix extensive and intensive reading?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
How is the best way? It's just like to do it. Because that is the main point of my project. Because we are, as I told you, we don't used to read so much in English. But as academic, with academic purposes, we need to read a lot. Yes, in English more, because there are some students that are more into English than into Spanish. Yes, so we want to. I don't know if the word is to awake the necessity to read because they want to read, not because a teacher said so.
True.
Yes.
True.
So to get the main goal, they need to know the strategies. And if we can mix intensive reading with extensive reading, we can. They can use the strategies of intensive reading in their free time.
That's
and they
right.
will enjoy reading, and they will read more often.
Yeah.
Yes. So in your experience as a teacher, you think that you can apply that? Because with the example that you gave me, you say at the beginning that was graded. You say that.
Yeah.
So that means that it's not because the students wants to read. It's because was something that was required in the classroom. Yes?
Oh, no, actually, no. When I mean graded reader, it means it's a book that has been simplified, so it's just above the level.
Okay.
For that student.
Okay.
So
okay.
yeah, it wasn't like it wasn't examined or tested in any way.
But for example, in your classroom with the students now in Celta, you give them like homework.
Yes.
They need to read a lot. I know that they need to read a lot. And they use now there is something that you ask them to do. But what about if they I know that I want to read about grammar strategies, for example.
Yeah.
But they do it because they want it to do it, because they want to acquire more knowledge besides your homework.
Sure.
That's a form. How to mix the.
Well, I think the thing with encouraging extensive reading is it all goes back to one thing in the end, okay, and that is sort of affect, okay. So how a person feels about something, and what motivates a person to read. So for example, when I was younger, I didn't read at all. My big sister read a lot. And I kind of didn't read to distinguish myself from her in a way, do you know what I mean? Because she was very clever. And I wasn't interested in it, not a reader, until I got to 16 and my school said to me, well, you can't go on and study, at 17 because your English isn't good enough. And I was like, what? And they were like, yeah, you don't read. So you can't study here anymore. And I was very lucky. I had a history teacher, and she intervened, and she said, well, look, if I give Melissa this book list over the summer and she reads all of these books, then can we accept her into the higher part of the school? And they were like, yeah, right then. And it was really interesting, because obviously, so there's a set of motivations there. One is my initial affect. I wasn't interested in reading. I wanted to distinguish myself from my sister, who read all the time, like constantly. And, I didn't like it, and I didn't think I was good at it. Right? So, faced with this big book list, can you imagine how I reacted? Pushed it away, right? Yeah. But I couldn't push it away because I really wanted to go into the high level school. So after sort of pushing it away for most of the summer, I was like, shh, I read this book. Okay, all right. And I had to. It was like 20 books, And they weren't easy. It was things like Tolstoy. You know what I mean? War and Peace. And really? But because I had this other motivation, this kick up the arse to read, I was like, oh, I have to do it. So I started doing it, and then I started enjoying it. And that's how that's by the end of it, by the end of 20 books, I suddenly realised I loved reading, which is interesting. But it all starts with affect. It all starts with, well, what do you want to read? Do you want to read? Do you find reading difficult? How do you feel about that? And I think before you even get into skills and strategies and crossover like that, you've got to think about choice. And I think students need to be given choices about things like reading, so that they have the autonomy over what they read extensively. Okay? And if it is something like not a book, but something online, that's perfectly acceptable. It still can be extensive reading, potentially, like if they're following someone's blog or something like that. So if you give students the choice, then they're more likely to take on the challenge. And I think that's probably, does that make sense to you? That's my starting point. Choose a book you want to read, or choose something you want to read. And then you have to explore the message of the text. And I think this is where it goes wrong a lot of the time in my experience with teachers, is they don't explore what the text is trying to say to someone. Okay, so then reading becomes really dull. Or even worse, you have to read aloud, which is just weird. You know, so to encourage students to read and to read extensively, they need to be encouraged to interact with the plot, the characters, if it's a novel, okay, or if it's an article, they need to be encouraged to interact with the debate that's in the article. And that focus on the message of the text is what makes you want to read more about the subject. But if there's no interaction with that message, if it's just answer these comprehension questions, for example,
the main characters or
information, it's meaningless.
Yes.
And the only reason why we would ever do anything is because it has purpose and meaning, because we're humans and we like to find meaning in things. So for teachers, one of the key skills is to get the students talking about what the text is communicating and reacting and responding to that. I think that's probably one of the biggest motivators to get students into reading. Did I answer your question, or did I go on a tangent?
Perfectly.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, good answer.
Cool.
My question. But now, so you said